Hi guys, welcome to another week of the incompetence trying to be competent in corporate underground. This week we have Andy Lark, who's globally recognised for his marketing and leadership. I've known Andy for a little while now, and he's done some fantastic things. He's been running the Software Zero, which was named by Forbes as one of the most innovative companies. Commonwealth Bank, Dell Logic, Sun Microsystem, Nortel Networks. I don't know what the man hasn't done. I know that he's actually worked with Mark Zuckerberg. So if you've got any marketing problems or issues this week, this is the man we need to talk to. I'm going to throw to you, Andy, and have a bit of a chat about being a Kiwi, moving to Australia. We've obviously wanted to increase the intelligence levels for both countries, and we've arrived. What have you found to be the most interesting job that you are working on at the moment?
Well, it's interesting. I came to Australia via the US, where I was for about 17 years up there and did the normal Kiwi thing of hanging around Europe for a bit long. So it's been a long journey to get to Australia. The most interesting thing I'm sort of plowing through right now is a really hot SaaS startup here in Melbourne, more than a startup, more of a growth company now, called Dubber. So really focused on driving the growth there and helping Dubber sort of propel itself forward globally. So it's sort of reminds me a lot of the early days of Xero, where there's this massive unsatisfied market opportunity globally with a product that scales, and so we're just going for gold right now, working non-stop.
Excellent. So why did you choose Dubber? I mean, I know you would have been throwing up a lot of choices when you were coming to Australia.
It's an interesting question because, I've spent about a third of my career inside massive companies, Dell, Sun, Nortel, Commonwealth Bank. I've spent about a third of my years building companies from the ground up in Silicon Valley and down under. And then I've spent about a third of my year either as a consultant, a board member, an advisor, those kind of more adjunct roles where you're on the edge of a company, either guiding it from a governance standpoint or advising it on growth. So it's been interesting. And this time around, I sort of reflected really hard and said I really missed the doing. I find that in the big roles, you're a long way from the doing. You're really going to a lot of meetings and managing a lot of people, but you don't actually get to do stuff. And I really love the doing. I love getting my hands dirty. I love making things. And so what really attracted me to Dubber was the technology and the founders and the opportunity, but also the ability to get in and get my hands dirty and do stuff. And I think it's a really hard decision, particularly as you get a bit later on in life, like I am. Like you sort of go, oh, do I really want to be sitting there writing press releases and building websites and looking at dashboards and trying to figure out why SEO and SEM isn't working and trying to figure out how you build a brand? But I kind of love doing that shit, Yep.
So, mate, you've worked at some really big companies. How do you balance your home life with your work life? Because I mean, when you go to these big companies, it's like 80-hour works. I know marketing, there's big things that come on. How are you able to balance that? I mean, you've got a family.
So I don't. Two things is well, let me start at the beginning. I'm a categoric evangelist for not believing in work-life balance. I don't believe technically it can't exist. Actually, technically, if you break up the number of hours in your week, you're going to spend a big chunk of them actually sleeping. It's funny, no one talks about sleep-work balance. Most of us sleep, and then we go to work, and then between that, we fit our lives in, and then we have these things called weekends, which I've concluded largely involves me as an Uber driver and Uber Eats delivery person for kids
for the family.
So, like work never stops, and so I'd still work a 70-hour week typically. But I think the most important thing to do is decide whatever you're doing is the most important thing and give it your full attention. And I would argue an hour of full attention with the kids or the person you love is worth 8 hours or 10 hours of inattention where you're only half there. So I think the key in life is not being distracted, not work-life balance. I think there's way too much focus on this sort of ideological notion that we should have work-life balance, whereas actually what you should be focused on is doing what you love and being with the people you love being with, whether they're at work or at home. And really what you should be doing is look to optimize your energy as much as you possibly can, and then optimizing your attention. as much as you can, because it's an old mate of mine, Dandapani, says, you know, where your attention goes, your energy flows. But if you don't have any energy, it ain't going to flow anywhere. And if you don't have any attention, well, you're double screwed. So I'm a real big proponent that this sort of obsession with work-life balance is just nonsensical. And what you should be really passionate about is making sure you're managing your energy, right? Like I find if I get up in the morning, I normally wake up between 4:30 and 5:30 a.m. and I go for a really big power walk, or I get on my trainer, on my bike, or on my tax, and I spend an hour on that. It's a totally different day for me. Like my whole world changes for the whole day ahead. If I stumble out of bed at 6:30, hungover from the night before, and then rush around the house madly, then I'm rude to everybody because I'm trying to rush to get out of the house. I'm a bit of an asshole there, and inevitably I'm just an asshole for the rest of the day. So, you know, I think how you start the day is how the day goes, and it all starts the night before, and that's how you manage your energy. Yeah.
It's I think no matter what time you're giving, it's a quality over quantity. You know, whether you're at work 10 hours but you're totally dead, or with your family, you know, for 5 hours a day, if you're not present or you're not a good person to be around, then it makes no difference how much time you're there. It's about the quality of time that you put into anything.
Yeah, and I desperately worry about, you know, someone asked me the other day, you know, what do you worry most about in relation to your kids? You know, is it sex, drugs, alcohol, you know, misadventure? And there's a great old statistic that the majority of men post World War II started dying between the ages of sort of 17 and 21, and it was normally preceded with the statement, "Hey guys, watch this," you know, and then something bad would happen.
It's natural selection, Andy.
Yeah, it's the Darwin and force, right? But I think the real challenge now is I look at the amount of time my kids are just sucked into their devices, and luckily for some reason I can still manage to barely put mine away and not be distracted. But I think that's the key, is attention. It's really attention, the quality of attention you can give to something that really matters.
So do you believe that the kids coming through have a chance? I mean, we knew a time before devices. We knew it. We could actually put it down and get away with it. I can still put mine down. But my nephews and nieces don't have that sort of ability. They just have to have it in their hand their entire time. It's now like an extension.
And they can't watch TV without watching YouTube simultaneously, and they can't play a game without chatting to their friends. So I do wonder whether there's something rewired in their brain that just makes them more socially skilled at it or digitally skilled at it than we are. But I do worry about it, and particularly over the apocalypse we've been in the middle of now for a year and a half, where some of the things when I'd see my kids when I'd take them away down to Lane Cove or something, and we'd get away from it all, and we'd be in the wilds. There'd be shitty Wi-Fi, and they actually had to do other stuff. What lovely human beings they turned into. I think that's the challenge, right? Is how do you get kids to switch off? And I put a lot of not the blame, but also I think, it is a bit blame really on the current education environment, which just seems to put so much pressure on kids to figure out what they're going to be at age 16. I don't know what the fuck I was going to be at age 16. I thought I'd be an artist, you know. And I was running cafes, and I was running a Vespa dealership, and I was doing all kinds of shit, you know. And, you know, I would have never guessed I've landed where I've landed. But I just think they're under so much pressure that when they look to decompress, they turn to those devices to decompress. That's their natural vehicle to do it. And it's also is their social device. It's how they connect with all their friends. And so, I think there's a real challenge ahead of all of us that are parents to try and figure this one out. I don't think it's easy.
And Andy, do you think marketing is partly responsible for that?
No, I don't. I think it's way too easy to palm responsibility off onto the government, the education system, marketing, the social networks, Apple. We have a fucking long list of people responsible, right? Pick your flavor. I think that the person responsible is the parent at the end of the day. We own our kids, you know. We own our kids, and we're owners, not just parents. And there's no operating manual, so to speak. And I've seen disastrous consequences over the past year of what happens to kids when their brains unwire themselves. And it's not a pleasant thing to see and experience. And I I think all you can do as a parent is sit there and go, what would I do differently? What could I do differently? Am I really giving my kids their full attention? Because I think actually that's what kids mainly want.
I think I was thinking about this, a lot, because I'm in digital marketing too. Everyone asks me, like about, when it comes to kids and marketing being, and Google and Facebook and all that sort of being the devil. And while they are like for many reasons, it's not new. We've all, like, every power that's existed has been craving our attention since before there was a digital device. Like, there was comic books, there was newspapers, there was all forms of media that wanted people's attention. So it's not new, it's just a different platform, one that's easier to reach. So I feel like, you could easily be disconnected from your kid in the 50s because they had their head listening to records all day,
But I mean, like, I come from a generation where we were actually let go at 8 o'clock and we weren't seen again till 6 o'clock. So our parents could get on with what they were doing. Now there's a point where they are so close to us all the time, and they're not given that freedom, that distraction that becomes an option. Like, I need an hour to get something done, or I need 2 hours to do something before. So mum throws used to be on the TV. Now they give them a device, or you see kids getting pushed in a pram and they've got an iPad and they're 4 years old. They're not looking at what's going on around them because it's for that moment of peace. So I agree with Andy. I think you're handing part of it away to somebody or something to look after it. Like it used to be to the nanny. We don't have a village anymore. It used to be that you'd have aunties and uncles, and we all never left.
Perhaps there's a new village they've joined. We're just not members of it.
It's kind of very much so.
It sucks a bit, right? And I think one of the tricks is as a parent, and I'm not a particularly good parent. I wouldn't put myself in the middle quartile probably, but I think that I think the challenge is we are owners, and owners set rules. So, I got in the car the other day and I said, there's no iPhones in the car today. And it was like, honestly, it was like I was giving them COVID. You know what I mean?
It would have been worse.
It was like the world's going to end. But I'm like, I'm not your Uber driver. If you can't talk, you can listen to the radio and maybe you'll find something to talk about. But man, kids hate silence. They hate silence. Whereas we actually grew up with it, right? We grew up with long periods of silence at the dinner table. Kids these days are like, oh, well, if dinner's over, I'm out of here. I got people to talk to, I got games to play. So it's just a different world. And look, I'm as negative as the first person on the impact social networks have had. But again, I just think it's too easy. I think it's too easy to blame the Facebooks, the Twitters, the LinkedIn, whereas actually what they've done is incredibly positive. They've enabled us to connect and communicate and stay in touch with people in ways we could have never done before. They've enabled us to form groups and collaborate like we've never been able to do before. So I think there's actually immense power in it all, but we just haven't actually cracked the code on it yet. And we've got a lot of work to do to crack the code on what's right for ourselves. And I think a lot of it starts with individual responsibility before anything else. It starts with individual responsibility, right? If we don't show our kids the way, they're going to mimic us. You know what I mean? There's a flip side. Our employees will mimic us.
Yeah, Andy, there's a completely different school of thought around that from, I think it's Alfred Adler, and there's a book that's written about these two Japanese masters and the student.
The courage to be disliked.
Yeah. So you've heard of it,
yeah.
It is, isn't it?
Both his books. He's got 2 books out now.
Yeah,
same author. They're absolutely fantastic reads.
Yeah, so you understand that kind of concept of in some ways almost giving people the freedom to start getting used to their own personal responsibility rather than it sometimes even just being the adult.
100%, and that's where I think the trick is around his philosophy in particular. Is his philosophy, and it's interesting, his book is based upon a teenager talking to a philosopher, because there's a point of consciousness that we develop as a human where we trip over into being able to observe ourselves, right? My 16-year-old is an acute observer of herself. My 13-year-old is just like, operates in his own bubble, Ups
Zero
the table in the middle
self-awareness.
of games, yells, screams, throws shit around, storms around. He's a classic 13-year-old. He hasn't yet developed that capacity to look back at himself and go, "Oh my God, did I upset that person? Oh my God, how am I going to be in front of those people?" So I'm a huge believer in Adler's philosophy, which basically comes down to own your shit. Own your shit. You decide, you own it. And who gives a shit what anyone else thinks, as long as you're not doing something corrupt or evil or bad, but own your shit, right? Yeah.
I was thinking, Andy, I don't want to derail this because this is fun, but I'm just thinking some of us that are listening don't know much about you. Matt did a bit of an intro, but I'm always like to hear what is from your background, such a cool marketing background. Before we jump into another episode later, what was the highlight, and then what was the most clusterfuck of I can't believe I had to deal with that sort of thing with your background? I love both.
Look,
positive and negative.
I'm under no illusion that I've been incredibly fortunate to have a set of amazing experiences. I don't believe in luck, right? An old boss of mine said luck stands for laboring under correct knowledge. I put myself in a position to be in the right place at the right time, so that's a bit fortuitous. But so I've had a whole set of just amazing experiences, which I feel really privileged to have had. And so, my highlights are seeing Xero blossom into what it became, from nothing, very, very small numbers to very big numbers, of completely random things many of the audience won't relate to, relaunching Dell in the notebook market, and building multiple startups, all that had exits in the many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. But my greatest thing that I look back on that I'm most proud of is where my people have gone, right? I look back at the number of marketers that have worked for me that are now CMOs of world-class brands or board members of world-class companies. And I stay in touch with many of them, and I go, that was always sort of my goal. My goal was always to help the best be better and realize their potential. And that's what I always set out to do, which makes me, for some people, impossible to work with because I'm incredibly demanding. But those people who are motivated and driven and want that, I'm a brilliant person to be with. So, look, I've been around some epic clusterfucks, right? And I think most of the clusterfucks that I'm most disappointed in have been largely caused by me, right? And I think they've been caused by me where I come back to my original starting point of our conversation, where I've failed to manage my energy, and I get impatient, and I get angry, and I get annoyed, and I get abrupt, and I don't really bring out the best in people as a result. And that results in actually them not performing and getting stuff done. And it's always look back on it. And look, I've been around some epic train wrecks as businesses go, from notebooks bursting into flames and having to recall them from the market, through to meltdowns of companies because founders storm out the door because they can't deal with boards anymore, through to all kinds of weird and wonderful things. But I don't view any of that as kind of like, oh my God, I just view that as part of the normal course of business. But the shit that's gone down that I'm personally responsible for, I look at and go, hey, yeah, that was me, not them. That was me, because I wasn't managing my energy. I wasn't managing my time. I wasn't paying attention. I was too distracted. And so you have to...
Did you realize that straight away, or is this something you reflect on that you realize now?
Normally the next day.
Okay. That's pretty quick still.
Yeah. Normally the next day I go, yeah, that was a bad call. But look, when you get a bit old, like some of us on this call are, you realize that shit happens, and all you can do is be humble, be reflective, apologize, move on, own your shit, and move on.
I think that's a good end to the segment, isn't it? Own your shit. Because we've got another one to go through. If you want
we got another
specific
episode.
topic. So
stay tuned. It'll come out next week. The topic of the threat with Andy. So we'll say goodbye for now, and we'll see you all in that next episode. Thank you very much. Thanks, Andy. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Andy. Cheers, mate.
See you next week.